Moscow said on Saturday it had arrested all 4 gunmen suspected of carrying out a shooting massacre in a concert hall near Moscow, and President Vladimir Putin pledged to track down and lawfully punish those behind the attack. Terrorist Islamist group Islamic State claimed responsibility for Friday's rampage. Clearly, but there were indications that Russia was looking for a Ukrainian link, despite emphatic denials from Ukrainian officials that Kyiv had anything to do with the massacre. Moscow Regional Governor Andrei Vorobyov announced that 133 bodies had been recovered from the rubble and doctors were fighting for the lives of 107 people wounded. In a televised address, President Putin said 11 people had been arrested, including the 4 gunmen. They tried to hide and rush towards Ukraine, where, according to preliminary data, a window was prepared for them on the Ukrainian side to cross the state border, he said in an address to the Russian people. Russia's FSB security service said the gunmen were contacting Ukraine and were captured near the border. They were being shifted to Moscow. On the other hand, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it was typical of Putin and other thugs to seek to divert blame to the states of their choice, not the actual ones. Ukrainian intelligence spokesperson told the press, Ukraine was of course not involved in this attack. Ukraine is defending its sovereignty from Russian army invasion, liberating its own territory, and is fighting with the occupier's army and military targets, not civilians. Islamic State has a reasonable motivation to strike Russia, which intervened against it in Syria's civil war in 2015, and security analysts said these claims seemed plausible, as it fit the pattern of past attacks, though has not time-framed. President Putin declared the enemy as international terrorism and said he was ready to work with any state that wanted to defeat it. All the perpetrators, organizers, and those who ordered this crime will be lawfully and ultimately punished, whoever they are, whoever is guiding them, Putin added. We will identify and punish everyone who stands behind the terrorists who prepared this atrocity, this attack against Russia, against Russian people. A senior Russian lawmaker said that if Ukraine has done it, then Russia must deliver a worthy, clear, and concrete response in the battlefield. Verified footage showed camouflage-clad gunmen opening fire with automatic weapons in the Crocus city hall near Moscow. Video showed people taking their seats, then rushing for the exits as repeated gunfire echoed above screams. Investigators said some died from gunshot wounds and others in a huge fire that broke out in the complex. Reports said the gunmen lit the blaze using petrol from canisters they carried in rucksacks. BBC News Russian service quoted as saying, one attacker was killed in the concert hall, and another in the car in Bryansk. The BBC said it had a copy of that dead man's passport, who it said was a 30-year-old citizen of Tajikistan. TV editor Samanyan published a video showing one of the suspects, a young, bearded man, being interrogated aggressively, replying in heavily accented Russian to a series of questions. He said he had flown from Turkey on March 4th and had received instructions from unknown people via telegram to carry out the attack in exchange for money. The Kremlin said Putin had held conversations with the leaders of Belarus, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, in which all sides affirmed their willingness to work together to fight terrorism. Islamic State, which once sought control over swaths of Iraq and Syria, claimed responsibility for the attack. The group's Amaq agency said on Telegram, Islamic State said its fighters attacked on the outskirts of Moscow, killing and wounding hundreds and causing great destruction to the place before they withdrew to their bases safely. The statement gave no further detail. President Putin changed the course of the Syrian civil war by intervening in 2015, supporting President Bashar al-Assad against the opposition and Islamic State. ISIS-K has been fixated on Russia for the past 2 years, frequently criticizing Putin in its propaganda, said Colin Clark of the Soufan Center, a New York-based research group. The broader Islamic State group has claimed deadly strikes across the Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Europe, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. Friday's attack, about 20 kilometers 12 miles from the Kremlin, happened 2 weeks after the U.S. Embassy in Russia warned that extremists had imminent plans for an attack in Moscow. Hours before the embassy warning, the FSB claimed it had foiled an attack on a Moscow synagogue by Islamic State's affiliate in Afghanistan, known as ISIS-Khorasan or ISIL-K, which seeks a caliphate across Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Iran. United States, whose ties with Moscow have been fraught since its invasion of Ukraine, condemned the attack and expressed sympathy for the Russian people affected. Arab powers and many former Soviet republics also expressed shock and sent their condolences. The White House said the U.S. government shared information with Russians early this month about a planned attack in Moscow and issued a public advisory to Americans in Russia on March 7. It said Islamic State bore sole responsibility for the attack. There was no Ukrainian involvement whatsoever, U.S. National Security Council spokesperson stated.